This week's episode of our show has been sponsored by Fables, the new episodic monthly subscription from Ghostfire Gaming.
Fables is an episodic monthly release that's an adventure that includes all of the maps, tokens, and everything you need to run it at your table.
Each Fable comprises of 6 linked episodes released over 6 months. Put them all together and you have a complete campaign.
Set in the worlds of Grimhollow, the first campaign, known as the Citadel of the Unseen Sun, takes place in the Estoian Empire, a realm of unending night, where vampires reign supreme and people live in fear of the unending darkness.
In this first Fable, it's up to your characters to bring the light back into this dark world. And best of all, the final dungeon of this 6-part series might have been written by a certain pair of dudes who might be experts in dungeons.
The first episode is coming in January of 2022, but if you sign up now, you'll get a discounted rate on your subscription. So follow the links below to get in your pre-orders now.
And now, on to this week's episode. Greetings! My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for DMs.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we're taking a look at the 5 new spells that were introduced in Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos. Now, this new source book for D&D 5e is actually an adventure, but there is some player content in this book, including these new spells and the Owlin playable race. And so today, we're going to look in detail at the 5 new spells introduced in this book.
Out of these 5 new spells, there is 1 first level spell and the rest are second level. They introduce a number of spells that are all available for wizards. There's a few in here for artificers, bards, sorcerers, druids, and clerics as well. Some of the other spellcasters, though, didn't get as lucky.
Yeah, nothing in here for a paladin or a ranger, but at least 1 spell for pretty much every other spellcasting class. These new spells have not gone without controversy within our community, however, and already some people have been calling for whether or not these spells should just be banned outright. Today, we're going to weigh in on these spells, talk to you about what they do, and really delve into this question of, is this some serious power creep in the game, or is this something that we can use in our games? There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
So we're going to go through these spells in alphabetical order, which means the first spell on our list is Borrowed Knowledge. This is a second level divination spell available for bards, clerics, warlocks, and wizards.
This spell has a casting time of 1 action and a duration of 1 hour with no concentration required to maintain it. It targets you and only you as the caster, and its effect is that it grants you proficiency in 1 skill that you're not already proficient in.
The spell lasts for an hour, but it ends early if you cast it again. This spell has a pretty obvious use. This is for anybody who is a spellcaster who also wants to be kind of the skill monkey of the group, allowing you to gain proficiency in something that you need in the moment.
I think the spell is pretty fair. Trading a second level spell slot to gain proficiency in a skill for 1 hour and having that only affect the caster actually makes it versatile, but puts some pretty meaningful limitations on it, especially because many of the classes that can access this spell tend to be focused on their primary spellcasting attribute as their highest ability score, and often take skills associated like that. So a wizard's often going to have investigation. They're often going to have the knowledge-based skills. A warlock will very often have the social skills. A cleric is going to very often have things like insight and perception. And a bard is probably going to be proficient in so many skills already and have skills that they already have expertise in, that actually I think a bard ironically gains the least from this spell, especially because bards already have jack of all trades. Right. So they're already half proficient in everything else anyways. So it's kind of ironic in that respect.
I actually 100% agree. I think that giving this to the bards was sort of an odd choice, because wasting a second level spell slot to gain half of your proficiency modifier in a certain skill just seems like a pointless waste of a spell slot.
It's a very, very minimal benefit, especially like if you think of the character that would love the spell, the theoretical half-elf lore bard. They're proficient in so many skills already. You're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of what you're going to get here. So often you might even be getting proficiency in a skill that you don't even have a good ability score modifier in. Now, I will say, I do think that this spell becomes better at higher levels. Because when you're a third level character and a second level spell slot is your highest level spell, casting this to get a +2 bonus, which is what proficiency would give you, not very good. But when your proficiency bonus is +6, that's a big swing, especially from a +0. So I think that this is one of those spells that in the late game might actually quite shine, especially for those situations where, like, you're a high-level wizard and for some reason you need to make an athletics check.
That's actually the big case, is like sorcerers and wizards oftentimes aren't going to be able to climb, swim, or do any of those athletic things very well. And I've been in situations as a spellcaster where it's like, we need to get away from this situation or into this situation and you got to climb, and it's always daunting. So that's actually the number one use. And when you are higher levels, it's also more likely that you have more second level spell slots that you're willing to blow on something like this. I will say there is something that I think could be a more interesting version of this spell if we're going to talk about ways that we would improve it. I think this spell would benefit if it not only let you pick skills, but languages, weapons, tools, and vehicles. If you could pick a proficiency.
Yeah. I think a few people that we spoke with in our Discord were like, oh, but you could use this to get tool proficiency. You cannot use this spell for tool or vehicle proficiency. One of the first things that came to my mind when I was reading this spell is that scene from The Matrix where Neo and Trinity are like, I know Kung Fu, and can you fly that helicopter? I can now. Ironically, this spell won't do that.
As a last note, I think stealth is actually a great candidate for a skill that maybe if you are the least stealthy person in your party, but everybody else is continually trying to do stealth missions, being like, I'm proficient in stealth now.
Yeah.
Great.
If you have a ranger in your party with Pass Without Trace, and then you pick up proficiency in stealth just from this, and even if you have a +0 dexterity, you could be getting a huge swing on your stealth check.
So next up, we have Kinetic Jaunt. This is a second level transmutation spell, which is available for artificers, bards, sorcerers, and wizards.
It has a casting time of 1 bonus action and lasts for up to 1 minute, but it does require your concentration. While the spell is in effect, your movement speed increases by 10 feet, and you don't provoke opportunity attacks.
You can also move through the space of other creatures without it counting as difficult terrain, but if you end your movement in the space of another creature, you get shunted to the side and take 1d8 force damage.
This spell reminds me a lot of Zephyr Strike, which Jill has used over and over again on her ranger in our Dungeons of Drakkenheim campaign. But for some reason, it doesn't feel as good.
Well, it doesn't give you advantage on your next attack or anything
like that.
And
it doesn't. And I think with Zephyr Strike, you get a bigger movement speed boost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like this is similar to the feat Mobile, but also not as good.
Yeah, I think that the thing here is that the characters that get access to this spell, many of them can get Misty Step.
There is a play here. I think that, like, it's not the worst spell in the game. It doesn't make our list of, like, it's no fine traps, but it's not something that I think I would pick.
I think it's very narrow in its application, given the classes that can access it. And I think that many of the builds that you might do around this spell are probably going to just want to take the mobile feat or something like that to begin with. Like, I was trying to think, okay, can we do something again here with like an Eldritch Knight or an Arcane Trickster? And I was like, I kind of still feel like Misty Step's the better play there, especially with that very restricted choice.
Even my sorcerer that I play, this is available to sorcerers, but if I'm in a situation where I need to get out, which is what this spell is advertising, increase your speed by 10 feet, don't trigger opportunity attacks, and you can move through creatures. I also have Thunderstep, which does a bunch of damage and gets me the heck out of there, and I can bring somebody else with me. The applications of that, which is a third level spell, but I would still use that over this.
I think the hardest sell with this spell is that it requires concentration, because I could see taking it maybe on a College of Swords bard or a Blade Singer wizard, or or if you're going to do something really wacky like a paladin sorcerer multi-class. But even in all of those cases, I feel like all of those characters have another spell they would much rather be concentrating on than this. And the fact that they can choose Misty Step, still concentrate on their much more impactful spell, and get that mobility in the one or two times in combat that they absolutely have to have it, means that you cover your bases better elsewhere.
If we compare this to something like Misty Step or Thunder Step, I do think the benefit here is that it stays on. Mind you, yes, concentration is a hard thing to give up. I have so many spells to concentrate on. Why am I concentrating on moving better when I have ways to do that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think the argument here is that on a Blade Singer or a Battlesmith Artificer or on a Sorcerer Paladin or even a College of Swords Bard, you're going to be using this to aid your mobility in making melee attacks. But even then, I think that all those characters have so many other solutions for their mobility to begin with. And then they also have another spell they would much rather concentrate on.
If you're watching this video, this is probably the spell you've been waiting to hear us talk about, Silvery Barbs.
Silvery Barbs is a first-level divination spell available to bards, sorcerers, and wizards. Its casting time is 1 reaction, and that reaction is taken when another creature you can see within range succeeds on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. This spell is notable because it's one of the first reactions that is on the Bard spell list, aside from maybe Featherfall. The spell has a range of 60 feet and requires only verbal components.
When you cast this spell, the triggering creature has to roll another d20 and take the lowest roll. On top of that, you get to choose you or an ally also within range and grant them advantage on their next roll of either an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. So you are basically giving a disadvantage, or there's other ways that this works as well, which we'll get into, and granting you or an ally advantage.
Some of the obvious ways that you can use this spell, very, very simply, is if a creature runs up to you and attacks you and hits you, you can force them to reroll the d20. It's even better if they crit you, because the chances are that when they roll that again, there is only a 5% chance they're going to crit. So it's a great way to negate a critical hit or turn a hit against you into a miss. Although, for sorcerers and wizards, turning a hit into a miss might be better with shield. It depends on exactly how open your DM is with information, right, about turning a miss into a hit and what the attack roll result is. Now, you can use this to turn a ability check success into a failure, although that's a little bit more of a narrow application. One of the sort of gray areas with this spell is if you can use it on a grapple or a contest, because if two creatures are grappling each other and one successfully escapes that grapple, they're rolling off against each other. So you could potentially use that in that way to escape or force a creature to get stuck in something that requires a strength check or a dexterity check to get out of.
So this also applies to saving throws. This means that if somebody casts Hold Monster on a monster that you're fighting and they have to make a saving throw and they succeed the saving throw, you can force them to roll again. What's really interesting here is there's a lot of applications that when you first read the spell, it sounds pretty cool. Okay, force a creature to roll an extra d20, you gain advantage, great. Also, another application of this is that if a creature is rolling with advantage, using Silvery Barbs causes them to roll an additional d20 and take the lowest roll. So you can actually turn a creature's advantage into super disadvantage with this spell.
And this is one of the sneaky things about this spell is that you never risk the creature getting anything better than the success that they already had. So for instance, in the example of a creature critting you, well, if a creature just hits you and you use it to turn the hit into a miss, and then the reroll d20 is a crit, it doesn't become a critical hit, it just stays a regular hit, because they have to use the lower roll. This also means that if there is a saving throw effect that has an increased effect if they fail by 5 or more, it is possible to cause that as well, or escape from it, right? So there's some interesting other kind of side applications in the fact that they don't get to then choose the higher roll as the result, right? You're always going to get a fair shot. You're never going to improve their results.
Yeah. Another really interesting application that we should talk about is how this works with legendary monsters. If you're fighting a legendary monster, they usually have a trait called legendary resistance. This means that if they fail a saving throw, they can instead use one of their legendary resistances to succeed instead. A really interesting application here is that if the monster you're fighting has 3 legendary resistances, you need to burn through them before you can really start laying into them with your valuable spells. Well, Silvery Barbs is a great candidate for forcing them to burn through their legendary resistance. The option here is that if the monster succeeds on their saving throw, you can use Silvery Barbs to force them to re-roll, perhaps turning it into a failure, which then makes them use a legendary resistance perhaps. This gives you a much higher chance of forcing the creature to use their legendary resistances, meaning that you can burn through them quicker.
Legendary resistance turns failure into success. There's no way around that. If the creature has used it, you can't then Silvery Barbs that again and force them to roll another d20.
So it doesn't bypass legendary resistance, but it does more likely force them to eat it up.
Yes, because some legendary monsters, particularly ones at high levels, they have great saving throws and possibly even magic resistance across the board. So it can actually be even difficult to get them to start using their legendary resistance. So this can be a way to hopefully debuff them enough that they start, and then maybe you've got a chance to do it. Silvery Barbs is available to bards, sorcerers, and wizards, but it's a first level divination spell. So what is really cool about this is that you could very easily pick it up with Magic Initiate or with a feat like Fey Touched, meaning that virtually any spellcasting character that has first level spell slots can very easily get access to the spell through a feat.
This opens it pretty wide in its application and means that this spell is readily available to almost any character in the game. And that can be a little dangerous. And I think we should get into what we think of the power level of this spell.
Yeah, well, I think that this is one of the few abilities in the game now that actively debuffs saving throws. And it's available right away at level 1. So what we have here is, for a first level spell slot, oftentimes those high level save or die or save or fail abilities, I'm thinking things like Banishment, Hold Monster, Disintegrate, Eye Bite, Finger of Death. These really big spells that are kind of all or nothing and a high level spell slot to boot. Well, a first level spell slot is basically giving you a second chance at your 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell slots. And that's a pretty big deal.
What's really interesting here is it doesn't interfere with the spell casting problem of bonus action and action spells. The rules dictate that you cannot cast a leveled spell as both your bonus action and your action. But reaction is not part of that.
And also, you're not in the middle of casting the spell. So sometimes people say that a spellcaster who casts a spell and gets counterspelled can't counterspell their own to defend their own spell because they're in the middle of casting their spell. But by the time a creature is rolling a saving throw against a spell, the spell has already been cast. So they have completed the casting of the spell, and we're now seeing if it's taking effect. And so a spellcaster can cast their own spell, and if the target of their spell succeeds the saving throw, can use their reaction to Silvery Barbs it, provided that, of course, that they haven't cast a spell as a bonus action in their same turn. So this does mean that you have this first level spell acting as an insurance policy for your very high level spells that are often a very high risk, high reward proposition. This makes these higher level spells much more powerful because you can just grab a first level spell slot to bolster it. And as a direct comparison, I want to just point out the Sorcerer has the Heightened spell. The Heightened spell, Mad Magic, imposes disadvantage to one creature rolling a saving throw against a spell. Well, 3 sorcery points is roughly worth a second level spell slot. So Silvery Barbs is a discounted Heightened spell, Meta Magic, available to wizards and bards. And the Sorcerer could also stack Silvery Barbs with Heightened Spell.
I have arguments for why this probably is being banned at a lot of tables, but I also have arguments as to why I kind of want to see how it works in play first. I do think that this is pushing the power level of spellcasters further than it needs to. But the other thing that I want to keep in mind is I was building a character recently who has 4 first-level spell slots, and I grabbed Silvery Barbs. I also have Shield in there, and a couple other useful first-level spells. The fact is that spell slots are a consumable option for your character. You can burn through them, and if you spam Silvery Barbs, you're probably going to burn through your spell slots pretty quick. So this is a finite use ability, and that's, I think, where the power maybe comes down a bit, and why... Although I understand that this is super powerful, I'm hesitating to ban it until I see it break my game.
I'm going to give you a counter argument to that burning through spell slots argument. If I cast Banishment and the monster succeeds their saving throw, I have now burned a 4th level spell slot. So if I would like to attempt that again, I now need to wait until my next turn, spend another action and another 4th level spell slot to attempt that saving throw again. Whereas with Silvery Barbs, right now, for a 1st level spell slot, I can force that creature to make the save again.
I don't really have an argument against that. I do agree that this spell is borderline too good.
It is borderline too good. The fact that it's a 1st level spell is the issue. I'm going to try giving this to monsters, and I'm going to see what happens when you have a Mind Flayer Arcanist with an Intellect Devourer that casts Silvery Barbs when the creatures succeed their Intelligence saving throw against having their mind devoured by an Intellect Devourer. Or maybe you want to have a Necromancer with a bunch of Banshees who uses Silvery Barbs against the Death Save, the Wail of the Banshee. There's a monster in Vol's Guide to Monsters called the Apprentice, which is a 1st level wizard who is challenge rating 1/4. It's not clear what giving a bunch of challenge rating 1/4 mooks Silvery Barbs does to their challenge rating, but it can't do too much to their challenge rating, so having a bunch of 5 hit point little dudes that can all cast Silvery Barbs accompanying your big bad evil guy is a pretty awful proposition for the player characters.
Should I be making a 2nd or 3rd character for our upcoming games?
It's entirely possible. So I don't like to use this as examples too much because obviously the Dungeon Master should show some restraint. But when we see what happens when a spell like this is deployed by the Dungeon Master against the player characters, it's immediately a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say this. If the players take Silvery Barbs, I'm going to give it to all my spellcasters, and then we're going to see what's going to happen. And I think very quickly if you do that, you're going to ban the spell. That's my prognosis.
Next up, the other one that we're probably going to talk the most about, which is Vortex Warp. This is a 2nd level conjuration spell, available to artificers, sorcerers, and wizards. This spell has a 1-action casting time and a range of 90 feet.
When you cast the spell, you choose a creature that you can see within range, and you whisk them up and teleport them to another space also within range. The spell uses some awkward wording here in that the creature has to make a Constitution saving throw and it can choose to fail, which is strange because there's other spells like Levitate that can be used on both friends and enemies that basically say an unwilling creature makes a Constitution saving throw, so I'm not sure why they chose this wording specifically. But essentially you can use this on an enemy or as an ally to teleport them from any space that they are to anywhere else within 90 feet of you as the caster. This is awesome.
I should note that the space that you teleport them to does need to be on a solid surface or on a liquid. But what's really cool here is it doesn't specify that you can't put them in harm's way. So you can't teleport them 90 feet into the air or 90 feet off of a cliff, but you can teleport them into a fire or into a lava pit or a pool of acid or under a hazard that the next person can then knock over onto them. So there's a lot of fun play there.
Yeah, my favorite use of this spell has already been continuing the theme of what happens when the Dungeon Master uses this spell. In a recent one of our games, I trapped a player character in a force cage, and they teleported out. And then I used Vortex Warp to put them back in the force cage.
Yes. So one of my favorite applications of this spell is, first of all, let's talk about the range. So 90-foot range, but what's important here is that you can teleport the creature that you target anywhere within range. So if you become the center point, it means that you can, in theory, teleport a creature 180 feet.
Yes, from one side to the other.
And that's massive. And there's a few applications here that I love. In a lot of games that I've played, Monty will have one of the creatures that we're fighting run to go warn more creatures. But how are you going to get away when I can just pull you, put you behind me in base contact with the fighter or the barbarian or whatever?
I also like the idea of using the spell. If you win initiative, you're the wizard, and the fighter is like 60 feet away from the enemies. Well, just catapult the fighter towards the enemies into the right position. Or potentially, if you want to set someone up to cast an AoE spell, but the barbarian ran in, you just whisk the barbarian out, put them to a safe place so that next turn you can drop your fireball.
A lot of people in my game who have played a barbarian or fighter love to shove and push people.
Yes.
If you're on a bridge, you can literally line them up, put them in base contact so you have the fighter, the enemy, and then the edge of the bridge or cliff. And then if they go next in initiative order, they can shove them off.
Yeah, I love the idea of setting up another player character to be able to pull off an awesome move. So you could also do this with spells like Wall of Fire, like things like Cloud Kill. You could do this with Hunger of Hadar. And it could also be a fighter or a barbarian or a monk that has a push attack, or it could be another character that can cast Thunder Wave as well. All these ways of basically lining up an enemy so that you can do the worst possible thing to them.
This spell, the reason why, unlike Silvery Barbs, which poses a power creep in the game, I think Vortex Warp is actually a phenomenal spell because it is really powerful, but it broadcasts such cool dynamic teamwork.
Absolutely. The power of the spell is pretty obvious. It is absolutely an S tier spell in my books, but I think it's a spell that encourages creative play. Like, I don't think that there's any creativity behind using Silvery Barbs to force a creature that succeeded a saving throw against Disintegrate to roll it again. There's no that is an obvious move, right? Whereas all the cool situational things that could happen in different environments, in different battlefield conditions, both when it's used by the enemies and when it's used by the players, Vortex Warp adds something cool to the game.
Another great use of this spell is because it's a second level spell and it has so many applications that can set up really dynamic play on the table. I really like that it's available for the Artificer, because at higher levels, the Artificer has the ability to infuse a spell into an item. And they get a number of uses of that spell equal to twice their intelligence modifier. So if you pick Vortex Warp, which again, broad applications. Yes. You can save your friends. You can set up your allies. You can get into or out of situations. You can throw enemies into terrible situations. You can throw people back into AoE spells. I love the applications of this spell. Having that 8 to 10 times on a stick, literally, that's great. And as the Artificer, you can hand that off to somebody else and let them be the Vortex Warper. So that is a really cool application. And because it's on the Artificer spell list, remember that ability from the Artificers, you don't have to have the spell prepared. You get to just infuse it into the item. So it's there.
Yeah. And now Wizards at 18th level also get the Spell Mastery feature, which allows them to choose a second level and a first level spell that they can cast at will. So as a high level wizard, you could choose Silvery Barbs and Vortex Warp as your Spell Mastery spells and be able to cast these spells at will, which is, I mean, you're an 18th level character, you got Wish already, you're pretty broken as it is, you probably got a Simulacrum and a Clone and all that good stuff, but wow, that's some power. I also think you could load up a spell storing ring with Silvery Barbs or Vortex Warp, and that would be pretty nasty too.
2 Vortex Warps and a Silvery Barb
or
on
just
hand.
5 Silvery Barbs.
Or 5 Silvery Barbs. Taking a step back from the powerhouse spells, the last spell that we're going to talk about today is Wither and Bloom. This is a second level necromancy spell. It's available to druids, sorcerers, and wizards. It takes 1 action to cast and has a range of 60 feet.
When you cast the spell, it causes a 10-foot radius burst where every creature within has to make a saving throw or they take 2d6 necrotic damage. You get to choose, though, the creatures in the area that take this damage. So if you have allies in that area, the enemies get hurt, but they don't. 2d6 damage isn't a lot for a AoE spell, even at second level, but, it's fine. One of the creatures, though, in that area can actually use one of its hit dice and regain hit points equal to the hit die roll plus your spellcasting ability modifier. So this is a spell that at range allows you to heal an ally at some cost to them and damage some enemies around it, which, considering it's available to sorcerers and wizards, is actually giving a healing spell to sorcerers and wizards.
I do actually like this spell. Now, comparing it to something like Vortex Warp or Silvery Barbs, it falls much lower on the list. But there are a lot of times, at least in my experience, where your meat shield characters, or maybe even a non-meat shield character like your sorcerer or wizard or somebody squishy, really, at some point somebody gets surrounded by minion enemies. Mm-hmm. And that's usually a bad situation to be in. Now, if your fighter is surrounded by zombies and you are standing back, watching them taking hit after hit, and their hit points are going down, the ability to pile on 2d6 damage to each of the creatures around it, which could be a lot, it seems more beneficial if you do have a swarm around them.
Yeah.
Then you're doing 2d6 to a large number of creatures, and then they get to heal back up. This seems like the obvious and best use of this spell.
I mean, it's not a lot of healing, but it is at range, and it does give you some damage. So it's roughly equivalent to being able to heal somebody for a little bit. And in most cases, the healing is going to be a little bit more than Cure Wounds or a little bit more than Healing Word. And you're going to get about a cantrip's worth of damage. So you can actually directly compare this to, say, casting Toll the Dead and casting Healing Word beside it as a cleric. And, kind of comes out in the wash in that respect. So it's just that you're casting a second level spell to do it and also having to expend that hit die. Although there's not a lot of ways to use hit dice, and I'm actually surprised that this is the first spell in 5th edition after all these years that actually uses hit dice to heal people. Feels like that was something that we could have had way sooner.
I agree, but that is also the thing here is that, yes, it's at a cost of a hit die, but I don't think I've ever ran out of hit die in a game of 5th edition.
It's really rare, and I'm now it makes me wonder, where is the spell that just lets someone expend a bunch of hit dice?
Wither and Bloom does have an application. It's not going to be as important as Vortex Warp. It's not going to be as broken as Silvery Barbs, but compared to the other spells on the list, I rank this as my 3rd favorite spell here.
Okay. I think that for me, it's a toss-up between this one and Borrowed Knowledge. I think Vortex Warp is by far my favorite. Silvery Barbs is the one that I have to acknowledge is the most game-changing, broken, controversial. I mean, I think that actually Vortex Warp, in terms of game-changingness, Vortex Warp and Silvery Barbs, it's kind of like, which one? It's just that one is game-changing in a good way, and one is potentially in a bad way. And so I'd be interested to hear from everyone out there, what is your response to Silvery Barbs? Please keep it civil in the comments. This is a spell that has inspired a lot of emotions, so please keep our comment section a positive and supportive place. We would like to hear from people who have actually used it at their tables, because we're going to reserve our final judgment on this one until we've actually used it in our games.
So this has been a look at the 5 spells introduced in Strixhaven for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If you've used any of these spells in your games, please tell us how it went in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube and elsewhere, please consider supporting our channel by following the links in the description below to get on Patreon.
Don't forget to check out our live plays in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which take place Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes of the latest season right up over here.
And we discuss tons of spells for 5th edition on our channel. You can find more videos right up over there.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.